So I found a really interesting article that I'll link that is purely just going to be something linked and people can look at it at their leisure. But it explains that wonderful sound that we all just heard again. And if you don't recall what that is, then you're young and I'm old, and that explains a lot.
Have you ever played that sound for your son?
Have I what?
Have you ever played that sound for your son?
No, I have not. That's a good thing. That's something I actually should do and see if he even has a guess as to what it is.
Yeah. You should also ask him if he has any idea what Be Kind Rewind means.
Oh, I know he has no clue on that one.
Yeah.
He doesn't even grasp the concept of disc media, truly.
Any sort of physical media.
Yeah. I mean, for him, everything is we navigate to whichever app has it on the Apple TV and play it from there.
Maybe when he's our age, he'll tell his kids about how terrible and how fractured all the UI were for all the streaming services, and now we have this one omni UI that, and where I'm going with this, right?
Yeah, it's funny because the first thing I wanted to do was rail against the horrific design of I think it's HBO and Amazon who do it, where
Amazon is the worst.
Through it like expands and starts to play something just as you're swiping.
Oh yeah. Okay, HBO. So I think Amazon has the worst UI, and HBO is the next worst UI because it does that expand and start playing a trailer or a snippet of it. Netflix has a thing where if you stop long enough on a selection, it will start playing a trailer or clip.
I can deal with that. I mean, I still think that's bad, but I can deal with that.
The delay is long enough that I haven't had a problem with it. I haven't hated it. This is so far off. Like, how did we get here from? Oh, I remember now how we got here. But this is so far from from what you were starting with. Go ahead, please.
I don't know. It's not that far. It's all terrible experiences. It's just terrible experiences from a different day.
Yeah. But they're incrementally. Oh no! Well, I was just say they're incrementally getting better. These experiences. They are. Do you remember having to watch all the ads on a DVD? Like, with the VHS, they'd have trailers and ads, and you could fast forward to the feature presentation. And then there were some DVDs where you could skip to the main menu, or you could push menu and skip the ads. But there were some that made you watch it every single time you put your DVD in.
Yeah, and having to watch the anti-piracy warning and the FBI warning and all that stuff.
It made you want to pirate things even if you were a good human being.
Yes, because you could shave off 3 minutes of waiting to be able to play the disc that you own.
Right. It made me, well, I won't say that. Anyway, I did ask my kids what Be Kind Rewind was just to see if they could figure it out, and they had no idea. And I explained it to them, and they're like, oh, okay. Because they'd seen a VCR and they'd seen VHS cassette. And then I explained it, because this is really where I wanted to go. And it was explaining to them what a rewinder was.
Oh, and how you were really high society if you had a separate rewinder.
Mm-hmm. I know that my family got a rewinder pretty late in the game. I say pretty late in the game. It was in the mid-90s. It was before 96, I know. But I also explained to them the nostalgia that I had of going to Blockbuster on a Friday night to rent a game for the weekend or rent some movies, and their counters there'd be 8 rewinders on the counter, open and ready to go. They didn't even close them because they're just ready to pop in a cassette and rewind it.
Yeah, I actually worked for a short stint at Blockbuster.
Oh, how'd you like that?
It was fun. I got free movies all the time and expanded my collection.
Nice. There's nothing better than taking as high a quality as you can get VHS cassette movie and downgrading it to the SLP speed, which was the fastest you could get a cassette to go because you wanted to put 3 to 4 movies on one cassette.
Yeah, equivalent to taking a DVD and compressing it to fit on a CD because that was the only media you could burn at
Oh
the
yeah,
time.
oh yeah. But it was the difference between having or not having,
Yes.
and at the time the quality was not so much that it was like, you know, running having a movie on the SLP speed of a VHS cassette not wasn't it wasn't so bad. It was a trade. It was not a hard trade off to make.
It's interesting. We tend to forgive video imperfections faster than audio imperfections. So as long as your audio was good, it was manageable.
Absolutely. Like I will watch a 360 a video that's at 360 whatever the resolution aspect. I don't know, whatever. It doesn't matter what the ratio is, but something below 480 and be okay with it as long as there's no drift. But like if you had like the crispest, like 4K video and there was audio drift, fuck that.
Yeah, I always liked seeing like good visuals and staticky audio because that told me that whoever decided to create that version of it did not know what they were doing.
Right. Did you ever download screeners?
It sounds familiar, but it does not sound familiar from use. It sounds like it's something that it seems like I recalled someone talking about it, but no, I never used it.
Movies where someone's like got obviously like a handheld cassette.
Oh, yes.
Like where they go into a movie and like they like sit in the movie theater with their camera and try to record the movie. Like try to sit, hold it for 2 hours at the level and right angle so that they try to fit in just the video screen, the movie theater screen into their video recording.
So there were also films where it was like a public release screener where it was actually encoded by someone with an embedded watermark, and that was another type of that.
Yeah, I'd see. Like I knew someone who downloaded one for some movie that they wanted to watch, and I watched like 2 minutes. I was like, no, it's not worth it. Well, for me, it wasn't worth it. It was just.
I think the first copy I had of The Phantom Menace might actually have been that way.
Ooh. My first copy of The Phantom Menace was VHS cassette. But I do remember seeing a copy of I didn't watch the whole thing, but I remember seeing a copy of The Lord of the Rings that had the watermark. So it was like one that was supposed to be transmitted internally or shared internally, but it got out and it had the watermark. That was a lot better than watching like where somebody went in to screen the movie with their cassette recorder.
Yeah, I remember if it had not actually been released yet, we would look for the versions that had the watermarks from the studios.
Would you use the Pirate Bay?
I did at one point.
Oh man! And then news groups after that.
I did news groups more in tandem with the Pirate Bay, and then eventually that shifted to a large enough network of individuals who had things that we just loaded up hard drives.
Oh yeah, I remember that. I remember there was a pretty sizable hard drive that floated around the GR.
There was actually, I don't remember the official. There was an application that was written that allowed you to create a peer-to-peer network easily among people you knew, where you provided, IP addresses and a key to your different individuals who would be the other nodes. I do not remember the name of it. I might have to try to do some searching, but we tried to do that for a bit as well. That way it was just our local group with one big file share.
Huh. That sounds pretty cool. It makes me think.
In practice, it didn't work overly well, but I think a lot of that was we didn't really know what we needed to know to get it working at the time.
It's funny you say that because this week there were two technologies that were at least 2010 and earlier that I was trying to remember and I couldn't remember. One of them was, or eventually figured them out, but one of them was trying to remember the manufacturer of a NAS from around 2010 and I knew it had something to do with robotics or robo, and I couldn't remember for a long time. And I ended up having to search for, like on Wikipedia, a list of NAS manufacturers, and I found it. It was Data Robotics that made the Drobo. Remember the Drobo?
I do.
I remember one person who had Drobo, and
they're not around still, are they?
They have changed hands a few times, and their parent company filed for bankruptcy last year.
Gotcha.
But I mean, they were blown out of the water by other NAS manufacturers, like to the point where it was, I couldn't remember, and I was having a hard time finding them until I had to look in Wikipedia for it. But yeah, they did not win in that space.
They did have a very interesting approach to it. Like, I did like the idea of mismatched drives being able to build an array out of. The only reason I never went that route was because I refused to be locked into a proprietary file format that there was absolutely no way I could ever recover from if I went to something else.
That is why I didn't go with Drobo. That's why I went with Synology. Because they do have a proprietary format, but you didn't have to use it.
Right. Which is funny because I actually ended up using their format after all.
Synology's?
Yeah.
Me too. Because it made a lot of sense, and it was based on RAID. It was based on RAID 5, I think.
Yes.
But it was basically, I think it was actually RAID 5 that they enhanced and bolted a bunch of stuff on.
Yeah, the main thing that I remember being a differentiator was you could use mismatched drives, and it would just use the lowest common sizing to create the array. So you could have incomplete usage of what storage space you theoretically would have, but that makes sense. Whereas prior, in older arrays, you had a lot of finickiness where if you didn't have exact matches on drives, you might not even be able to build an array. Now, granted, over time that got better as well, but most of that's because of the influence of Synology.
Yes. JBOD, right?
Just a bunch of disks? Yeah.
Yeah. Just a bunch of disks or just a bunch of drives?
I've heard both.
Yeah. Disk seems more accurate, I think.
I actually have a 4-disk enclosure that I have older SSDs in, striped, that I just have named JBOD.
Jesse's big
old drive.
Big old drive.
Go with that.
I was trying to come up with something clever like that, but so
That's what I back up the Logic projects to.
I have a Synology. It was a 4-bay, one of the 4-bay disk stations. It was the first one that they sold that utilized 2.5-inch drives. So it was small. And
yeah, I don't remember their model numbers very well, but I think the 214 or something like that was the first one that they seemed to market in that space. And that might have still been 2.5-inch drives. Yeah, it probably was, because I have the 414, which is 4 3.5-inch drives. And then I've got the 8-bay one as well.
Oh, wow. I remember the first time I'd put together an 8-bay for someone, and he put, I want to say 4 terabyte drive. This was 2015. He put 4 terabyte drives in there, and I just remember the first time it started up and hearing all 8 of those drives start crunching in unison. I was like, oh, it was a really cool sound.
Yeah, it took me until last year to finally get the last drive in my 8-bay upgraded so that they're all 4 terabyte.
Oh man, this guy that I was doing this job for, he was an eye surgeon, and I got to work on his stuff because he had some networking issues because the house he bought had all concrete walls. And so, like, Wi-Fi in his house was awful. So, former work colleague of ours and proprietor of a Apple certified consultant had gone into his house and just put built a mesh network and put access points, numerous access points and mesh. What are the mesh endpoint? Are they endpoints? I can't remember the terminology for the.
Well, it depends on what product you're using, because the access points can create a mesh network among themselves as well. So.
Oh, they were using. I know they were using Ubiquity access points.
And I would expect that it's a combination of. Well, you could think of it as a mesh for the wireless access points, but the biggest thing is that wireless roaming, I'm sure, was enabled to move from access point to access point.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and so this guy, he wanted to have his media on. He had the vision. He didn't know what he needed, but he had basically had the vision for Plex and didn't know what to do, and we did a Synology for him that was running Plex server, and he also had all of his music on. He had moved all of his music on there, but straight up just bought the 8-bay because that was the biggest one they had at the time, and I think 4 terabytes was since it was like a client and doing work for a client, it was 4 terabytes was the largest supported drives that Synology had, I guess, qualified for that NAS.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about 7-8 years ago, that's probably the largest you could get at the time if you didn't go just astronomically expensive.
Yeah, and I remember this was pretty expensive even for the at the time, but this guy also had like well over $250,000 in his audio setup in his office just for the loudspeakers. I'd never heard music reproduction like that before in my life. It felt like I was in a concert hall.
I think we've actually talked about that on the show as well.
Have we?
See, the problem is I've heard this story a number of times, and I don't remember now whether it's something we've talked about on the show or if it's just because I know the story. We've now recorded long enough that I can't keep those straight.
I understand. Because, I know that I say this has probably been on the show because it probably has. So I had follow-up.
I saw. Why don't we go into follow-up finally?
Yeah. This is the longest preamble. So I had follow-up from episode 121, Okay, But Why? And it was about the number of cameras used for bullet time. So I guess the first, where I looked this up, they called it the most famous iteration of bullet time, which would have been the first one in the Matrix where Neo dodges the bullets on the rooftop in the city. The city where they recorded that was Sydney, Australia, and they chose Sydney because they could make it. They use whatever post-editing digital magic that they do to remove the Opera House and any other unique landmarks. And they said, we can make it look like any city. Because I remember watching it thinking, is this Chicago? But 120 still cameras and 2 film cameras were placed together to create the illusion of motion.
And it certainly sounds more reasonable than my thoughts that it was far greater number of cameras, even though I know we've talked about this offline. It wouldn't surprise me to learn that they used an insane number of cameras later on throughout the series.
Yeah, so that makes me think, what bullet time effect has had the most cameras?
It's a good question, because I wonder how much of it, as you get into later installments, was CGI.
Maybe I'll have follow-up next week. It's not readily. I did a quick search and it wasn't readily available. It just keeps talking about the first one, because not long, less than 2 years after that, there was full CGI bullet time in Shrek. There's a fight scene where Fiona, she knows kung fu, and there's a full-on bullet time scene there. That was all CG.
Yeah, but the whole film was CG.
I know.
Right?
Yes.
Does it really count, though?
I mean,
at some level, sure, right?
Yes, but not what you're talking about.
Yeah,
So the other follow-up I had was from the following episode, episode 122, project updates. I had mentioned the drug Ozempic, and I knew that it was some sort of it was in a class of drugs, because it's not the only one like it, but it's Ozempic is the brand name of the drug, and the actual drug is called semaglutide, and it's a GLP-1 receptor agonist. And I only understand what that is from having worked in labs and stuff and heard people talk about stuff like this that, kind of bored me, and how I realized that that's not what I wanted to do with my life. Anyway, it mimics the action of human incretin glucagon-like peptide 1, GLP-1, increasing insulin secretion and increasing blood sugar disposal and improving glycemic control. So basically, I guess it doesn't increase your metabolism so much as it keeps your blood sugar high and runs through, I guess, the sugar content faster, so that you, one, feel less hungry, and two, resulting in not eating as much, but also go through your sugar stores sooner. So, because sugar that you don't use and don't excrete eventually becomes fat cells, or fuels fat cells.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I certainly don't have a wealth of knowledge in the area, but one thing that I've always heard was increased increased insulin secretion typically equates to increased fat storage. And so it's interesting to me that it both increases insulin secretion and does something to help mitigate that increase.
Yeah, it was described as increases blood sugar disposal. So yeah, I think if you just did insulin increase, then that would be a problem. So it's got to do both of those things. But it mimics what your body does naturally. So your body does this naturally, and you take this drug, and it does it more than the patient's, that the person that the drug's being administered to, their body does on its own. It just adds to it. So it's pretty cool. A friend of mine was telling me, he's been, over the past year, he's been prescribing this to patients that he has, and anecdotally, he's very positive. A lot of good results, and he says there's about a decade's worth of research that has gotten to the point where it's like, yeah, this is a thing that we should, it's a good thing to be prescribing to patients. Anyway, that was all my follow-up.
Well, you, certainly interesting follow-up, but you have thoughts on the topic too, so why don't we kind of introduce that as well?
Okay, so I don't even remember where I was looking and what I was looking for, but I came across an article that said Wyoming lawmakers push for electric car ban and to limit sales by 2035, and I'm like, what the hell? Because
yeah, I don't understand that at all.
Right. So, Wyoming doesn't seem like it's a state that is going to have a lot of electric vehicles to begin with, just because of how expansive it is, and not a lot of charging stations with a relatively, a low density population. It just, it didn't seem like this was a need. But there are a group of Republican. This article from a lot of what I'm pulling from is USA Today article, but a group of Republican Wyoming lawmakers want to phase out the sale of electric cars, saying that it will help safeguard oil and gas industries. I'm like, it's like, could you be more No, you can't be more transparent than that. It's while I've got my own feelings about electric cars right now, electric vehicles right now, but this is where we're going. Like it's not unclear whether or not it's the best place to go. That's a whole other thing. But it's clear we're getting away from burning fossil fuels for, getting the least number of people from point A to point B. But
I would just interject and say there's more emphasis there than you're giving credit to. At some point, there will no longer be fossil fuels.
Right.
It is an inevitable outcome. So at some point, there has to be a transition regardless.
Yes. So
is there a reason we wouldn't want to be prepared for that ahead of time?
Well, there's a lot of good reason to. Well, so that's the thing. Are electric vehicles cleaner for the environment? So I saw some data from the late 2000s, so around 2008 to 2010, that suggests that the carbon footprint. So at that time, carbon footprint for hybrids was about the same as the comparison I saw was a Toyota Prius and a BMW M3 at the time had a V8, and the carbon footprint for each of those vehicles was the same. It had more to, like your emissions had more to do with how you drive the vehicle than so much than how efficient it was, I suppose. But the reason the footprint was so big for the Prius was because they included the carbon footprint of mining for the materials to manufacture the battery. But that's a decade and a half old data.
Yeah, and that makes sense to me. Like I assumed that's where you were going as you were talking about it anyway, because realistically, what have we done to make mining more environmentally friendly?
Not just that, but you mine them. I remember the example that they provided with the Prius was that the nickel, for example, was mined in Canada and then shipped to somewhere in Eastern Europe to be refined, and then shipped to another location, and then eventually shipped to Japan for use in the battery. So in addition to like mining being a relatively dirty and having a large carbon footprint, all the shipping also increased the carbon footprint. So I didn't see the breakdown of each of those things, but overall, a decade and a half ago, the carbon footprint of the ownership of a Toyota Prius versus the ownership of a BMW M3 was the same. So we are also in a place where the materials that we, just like fossil fuels, the materials that we mine for batteries is also going to run out. So some of the that being the case, some of these the lawmakers in Wyoming cited that as a reason to ban. They cited it as a reason to ban electric vehicles. They also cited that the batteries are not easily recycled, and there was also concern that because a lot of the people in their state are employed by the oil industry, that it would cause some issues with the state's economy. I believe they said it would be detrimental to their Wyoming's economy. So while this may be the case, banning electric vehicles is not going to solve any of those problems.
And even then, it's like saying you want to ban the ability to put solar panels on your roof because it doesn't support the natural gas industry.
Right.
I mean, if you choose to pursue alternative energy sources, is that really something that should be regulated at the state level? And obviously, there's the argument for it, just like there is the argument for anything that would be regulated or not regulated. I mean, you could turn the whole argument around and say that firearms fit the same general argument. Should it be regulated at the state level, or should bullets be regulated instead of the firearms? And you can have fun with picking apart these arguments in a political arena all day long.
Well, if you're a follower of Jeffersonian politics, then yeah, it would be at the state level, or maybe even closer to home. But I feel like probably state level. But if you like the politics of Hamilton, then it would be a federal issue that should be, it shouldn't be something that the state could mandate. So there's that.
That actually, there probably needs to be follow-up at some point about what the general delineation of what should be federal versus what should be state was drafted as opposed to what it is morphed into. But I'm not prepared to have that discussion.
Oh no, neither am I. This is what really bothers me about it. The bill is sponsored by Senator Jim Anderson, and he said, quote, "I don't have a problem with electric vehicles at all," unquote. Quote, "Anyone who wants to buy an electric vehicle should have the freedom to." And he then said, unquote, and then he said, like he's got friends and family members that have them. So it's just like, it is like, I understand the politics. I understand the bullshit. I get where it's coming from, but this is not even corruption. So, well, I mean, there's some corruption here because, the oil and gas industry, but it's not even the corruption that's the issue here for me. It is the stupidity of it. Like, here are some things that we're citing. They're, electric vehicles are really not the problem. Electric vehicles have been made to be a foil or a scapegoat for these other issues, and it feels like a lot of song and dance.
I get that, but at the same time, isn't that what pretty much everything has become within the GOP?
Yeah,
and I want to make sure I emphasize that I'm not necessarily trying to pick on a party.
No, you're devil's advocate.
But when your party is built on division and saying whatever you need to say in the moment, as opposed to actually strategically charting a course through getting from election to some legislation passed, you kind of get what you pay for.
Mm-hmm.
And that, to me, is what this kind of represents. I have to represent the interests of my constituents to be able to remain in power, or to seek re-election whenever that may be. I don't personally have an issue with it, and I want to go on record that I don't personally have an issue with it, because that endears me to other constituents that might be more open-minded, but the bulk of the people that I represent think electric cars are the devil, and so I have to do something. Instead, the whole point of being a leader would be, hey, I get that you guys are concerned, and there may be an impact to our general way of life, economy, whatever, but we need to embrace moving forward. And this is how we do it, and this is how we retain a certain amount of influence in that new economy without losing, billions of dollars or whatever. Like, coming up with a solution, not, oh, well, you don't like electric cars? Let me get on stage and say we should ban electric cars because that's what you want to hear. And that's the problem. Like, I'm okay with wrong decisions on where we need to go when it's built on a platform of, this is a plan that I envision, and this tries to get us to a solution that at least seems to be connected to reality in some fashion. I may completely disagree with it, but if you can at least show me this is the issue that I want to address, and this is how I want to address it, I at least give you respect for trying. And that, to me, is what's missing.
Right. Where it's banning electric vehicles doesn't solve the problem of batteries, the materials that we use for batteries running out, because I think, you know, the world population is as large as it's ever been in our recorded history, and we are using more batteries and more devices than we ever had in recorded history. So even if you were to, ban electric cars in the state of Wyoming, there's still a lot of batteries everywhere. So it doesn't solve that problem. Maybe it slows it down, but there's not that many people buying electric cars in Wyoming. So I don't know. I don't think it makes that much of a dent. The citing that the materials that are used to make batteries being difficult to recycle. Well, my previous comment, there's still a lot of batteries out there, including lots of batteries in Wyoming, in people's phones, and people's computers, and people's power banks, and people's headphones. Like, there's a lot of batteries. So it really, I don't think that banning electric vehicles solves that problem either. And the last thing that he said was that it was going to have a detrimental impact on Wyoming's economy because of the article. The writer of the articles was the deleterious impacts of gas power. The oil industry, effects on the oil industry. It's like, well, have you heard of this this thing called fusion? Like, that is going to be I think in the next couple of decades is going to hugely disrupt Wyoming's economy as well as the rest of the world.
I'm trying to remember, and I don't recall for sure the article that I saw about the breakthrough you're referencing, but it seems like there was a call out that we're still talking probably 20 to 30 years before it manifests into something that might be usable.
Yes. That's correct.
I only wanted to mention it so that it's on record, that it's not like a false belief that we're talking a decade out kind of thing.
Well, you say that, but the conservative estimates are about 20 years away from this being something, or from getting like the first fusion plants online. And there have been some people have been bold enough to say maybe in the next 10 years we'll actually have the first fusion power plants online.
Yeah, those estimates to me feel overly hopeful, and that's probably just the Gen Xer in me taking charge.
Well, it's been about 100 years of research to get to this 100 years of work to get to this successful experiment, but it required a whole lot of other technologies coming into place and being usable to actually get this experiment to work. If these technologies were in place 100 years ago, it wouldn't have taken that long to get the successful experiment.
And it's certainly a fair point. Like, none of us know what the next few years will bring anyway. But the main reason I wanted to emphasize the estimates was that we don't truly know how much time we have left on fossil fuels and the detriment that will cause environmentally over just 5 years, much less a decade. And so there's a growing body of research that is concerned that we may not have reached a point where we can alter the eventual outcome of catastrophic environmental damage.
Yeah. You're referring to global warming?
Sure. I was trying to avoid bringing the buzz phrase in, but yes, I am referring to global warming.
It's interesting because I remember at some point, global warming, and then somebody says, no, climate change. It's more inclusive of all the terrible things that are about to happen. And then not too long ago, I found out climate change was just used to stop saying global warming because it didn't sound as bad. It didn't sound as scary. No, it's still like the overall temperature in our climate worldwide is increasing. That is global warming. So it's not the only climate change, but it's the big one.
Yeah, for me, the reason I like referencing it as climate change is because it takes into account the changing recurrence of specific storms and all as well. Like, it's not just the aspect of overall temperatures increasing. It helps to emphasize that temperatures will increase and droughts will be more frequent and severe weather will be more frequent. Like, all of these things change in relation to one another. And saying global warming gives a false sense of, oh, it's just going to be warmer.
Yeah,
and that's not really a good way to think of it.
I think that's a very good point, and I think so. The problem is most people are not going to want to say global warming and the negative ramifications of climate change that are a result of, it doesn't roll off the tongue.
Well, and at this point, most people are too busy trying to deny it or spin it into something else about it being a cyclical thing that occurs. And we've seen ebbs and flows of, increased temperatures and then decreased temperatures. And
well, they are not wrong about that. I mean, there is, there was an ice age. There was a time when animals, lived on this planet and it was warmer than it is now. But, it's not, and to be, if we go back far enough, the climate of the Earth was far worse and far more harsh than we will be able to destroy it to. We'll die long before it ever becomes that harsh again. It's that this ecosystem that supports our lives is going to fall apart before the Earth ever does. Earth is going to be fine. But we will not. At some point, it might just be cockroaches left, and they'll have to start over.
Yeah, I don't have a good response to that one.
No.
I don't want to take away from it because it's so very true.
Yeah. So, it's like, the Earth is fine. It's this ecosystem that you have come to enjoy is kind of in trouble.
It's funny. The way that it was always explained to me was that you should think of Mother Nature as a host. And we are a parasite, and the host will do everything in its power to destroy a parasite. So as long as we're at a harmonious level with Earth in general, with nature in general, we don't have anything to be afraid of. But as soon as we start affecting nature in a negative way, it will absolutely get rid of us.
Oh, I really like that comparison because it's like, at the point where you're in balance, it's a symbiotic relationship, and as soon as if that symbiotic relationship shifts too far into one direction, then you have a host parasite relationship.
Yeah, I always thought it was the best analogy that anyone could ever provide. So this is what I've always fallen back to, or fell back to, anytime I was talking about climate change in general.
Yeah, it's a great analogy. So fusion, when I was writing the notes, I initially put cold fusion, and I was like, well, wait a second, I don't know if this is actually cold fusion. So I went and looked up cold fusion. It is not cold fusion; it's just fusion. It's actually very hot fusion. So basically, what happened in the experiment was that this is pretty cool. The facility was the National. Let's see, what is it? The National Ignition Facility? I don't know. The abbreviation is LLNL. Okay, let me. I don't remember what LLNL stood for. Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory in California. They have a National Ignition Facility, and that's where the experiment was conducted. And so what they did was, in the facility they had 192 lasers, which is the world's largest laser system in a building about the size of a sports stadium, and they aimed them all at a diamond-coated capsule about the size of a peppercorn, so really small. It created an immense amount of pressure and temperature, and they said it was several times hotter than the sun's core. And they used a little over 2 megajoules of energy, and got 3.15 megajoules of fusion energy out. So it was a net positive, which is why everyone is so excited about it. That's pretty cool.
It is. And just to mention, because I know it can get lost in the details, this particular facility was not equipped to try to harness said return on energy. This was just proving that it was possible.
Right. At this point, they're just trying to, they put in X amount of energy and they want to get more out. So I just, I guess, after reading the article, they succinctly, compared it to fission, which is, the nuclear energy that we have now, because fusion is also nuclear energy. And they talked about why this, why would we be, we've got nuclear energy, but why would you be pursuing fusion? Because it's better in almost every way. Before this experiment, before the last few weeks, if you had asked me, like, what do we need to do to get off of fossil fuels, or to be less, it wasn't even to get off of fossil fuels, it was to be less dependent. The conversation was, what does the world citizens need to do to have less dependency on fossil fuel? And I remember thinking, like, there's no silver bullet for this. We've got to harness, solar energy, wind energy, hydroelectric energy, all these things. There's no silver bullet. But after hearing about this, fusion might be the silver bullet for getting us off of fossil fuels, not just reducing dependency on them.
So I don't remember enough, honestly, about the differences between fission and fusion. But if I remember correctly, fission requires more energy than what you receive in return, correct?
No. Fission, you still get more energy out of it than you put into it. But the problems with fission is you have to use big elements, big heavy elements like uranium. And because the amount of energy that you put into splitting the uranium atom is I guess a significant amount less than you get out of it. But the problem is you have leftover nuclear waste, which is not good for us, and it doesn't go away. Like it's here for.
Well, that's when you get into measuring by half-lives and hundreds and thousands of years for decay.
Right. It's nobody that's here today is going to see it go away. Like we're stuck with it for a while. But yeah, hundreds of thousands of years of half-life. So it's not just lots of bad radioactive material. It's lots of bad radioactive material. Like, it creates a lot of waste, and there's also meltdowns. Once what is the term that we use for this? Once you have, I remember while working for Apple, they would call it a thermal event. Once you hit this hump, that would result in a nuclear meltdown. Like, it's hard to cool that down. It's hard to cool it down and to stop it. So the possibilities of a significant disaster. Well, it's not that the possibilities. I guess all the significant nuclear disasters have been preventable. They were. I think we've looked back and seen that, like, a lot of them were human error that was totally preventable. But even if it's not the issue with a nuclear meltdown in a fission reactor, is that it runs away and it's really hard to get under control. And with fusion, it's the exact opposite. Once you remove energy from the system, the meltdown stops. So it is a lot safer for meltdown. I think they said in the article, it talks about because they actually said there's no risk of meltdown because fusion stops within seconds of removing the energy. So you cut off the energy that you're putting into the reaction. No, the reaction stops. There is no meltdown, which is the opposite of fission. And the other thing with radioactive waste is that fusion makes way less radioactive waste, and because it's fusing, you're fusing really small atoms like hydrogen. It's way less nuclear waste, and the half-life of that nuclear waste is much shorter.
That makes sense. I need to go back and read up some more on the differences again, just to reacclimate myself with, middle school science.
Well, I mean, this is the article that I linked in our notes they did a really good job of explaining that, and so I mean that's where I informed myself. So
yeah, I'll certainly read it. I remember seeing the headline, and I remember saying, "Oh, that's actually really neat," and then I never did any further digging.
I guess if you wanted to, I could talk about the storm cloud over this relatively exciting experiment.
Yeah, sure.
There's a lot of military interest in this.
Which really shouldn't be surprising.
No, it's not surprising, but it's just like, God damn it. Why can't we have nice things? Why can't we have nice things and it just be nice things and not be used for the military-industrial complex?
On the flip side of it, how many nice things do we have as a result of the military-industrial complex?
Fair. That's fair. But how many nice things do we have from NASA?
Yeah, a lot more, I would imagine.
Right, and they didn't hurt anybody except for the people on the Challenger.
Well, that's debatable.
I mean,
a lot of NASA's funding comes from the military-industrial complex. It's just not directly military application at the time.
Yes, and there is, it's not the military that I really want to rag on. I think the military is actually, there could be a lot more good that comes out of the military, and the problem is the same with every goddamn topic that we talk about on the show is if you pull the thread long enough, you'll find, the same exact problem. The few people that have power and have money wanting to maintain the power and keep the money. The other maybe even bigger storm cloud over this is that if fusion does become the silver bullet that takes us off of fossil fuels, oh man, I can't imagine what that's going to do to the economy.
Yeah, that's an interesting question because it depends a lot on how fusion power would be harnessed for the initial, let's just say 5 years. Like, are we talking about strictly powering the electrical grid, or are we talking about mini fusion reactors in vehicles?
I don't think many, never say never. Like on an infinite time scale. We have Mr. Fusion, from
Back to the Future.
Yeah. So maybe.
But that's really the gist of the question, though, is more a matter of how fast do we see miniaturization of the technology as opposed to just bolstering the electrical grid and actually making it sustainable for a change. Which I don't know anybody that could argue that wouldn't be a positive. I mean, if you really back up and think about just the United States electrical infrastructure, it can't support life today appropriately when you're talking about dealing with heat waves or cold waves. I mean, just look at what Texas went through with unexpected snowfall, and what the Southeast deals with constantly with severe weather. I mean, the electrical grid needs additional bolstering, period. I mean, it can't keep up with demand, truly. And even if this was just a way to supplement and improve that infrastructure for a decade, that alone would be disruptive. Would it be disruptive to the extent of, replacing natural gas in the home? I don't know. I'm not real sure if everything would start to convert to electric heat because it's more reliable or more accessible, or would you still have areas where electrical power might still be problematic during storms, and you would still have gas for auxiliary heating or cooking or whatever? I mean, take your pick, right? What would that look like as a blend into the current infrastructure to take it to a sustainable point?
Yeah, so I think that that's the interesting thing. It's like, I feel like that if fusion was available and we were like trying to get fusion reactors online to power the grid, I have no faith in current leadership to do that in a competent way, in all sense of the idea of competence. But it's 10 to 30 years out, and perhaps the leadership will have a better, will be better and have a better mindset of like, let's begin to phase in fusion energy and phase out fossil fuel energy, so that you don't have a clash, and that you can keep the economy stable. Because like all of the doom and gloom things that I'm saying right now have all to do with where we've been, and that doesn't mean that's where we'll be in a decade or two. I've said many times that I have hope for the future generation, so I will continue to say that I do have hope for the future generation, and there's a possibility that leadership will be far more competent and empathetic and have the foresight to properly transition us from one form of energy to another. I'm not sure if this is like a partial answer to your question.
I mean, sure, but my gut feeling is to respond with, well, not to shit on your parade, but the past decade has shown us that leadership isn't all that quick to change, and is not very cohesive when it does, and so I would not necessarily take that bet.
Well, I understand that, and you're not wrong about any of that, but that doesn't take into account that they're all about to die because they're old.
Yes, very, very fair. And it also doesn't take into account the fact that younger generations are more inclined to vote according to principle than party.
Yes.
And that is a welcome change. The biggest problem is that we've still had such close elections that I don't feel like we're over that hurdle.
We're definitely not over that hurdle, but again, in the next 10 to 20 years, I think the death of many Americans will get us over that hurdle. Or rather, not the death of many Americans. That sounded wrong. Memo to you, edit that out and put in the part where I say, as I understand the aging process, getting over that hurdle will occur naturally over the next 10 to 20 years.
Yeah, that doesn't quite... I mean, so yes, you're not wrong. But like the past 2 years have shown us that it's not even the natural process of aging out of involvement in politics necessarily. It's also ramifications from poor decision making and poor hygiene, and the list goes on. There are a lot of things that have
subpar education.
What's the term for abnormally increasing the aging out of a population? blank. That's a good way to describe it, because that gets to the gist of what I'm meaning, is that it may not even be 10 years. The problem is that I feel like it's so far out still that I don't believe it's going to be 10 years. And that's purely a personal cognitive response. I'm concerned with current results, and I don't want to take for granted that even though we've seen positive trends, there are still a lot of really dumb people out there that want to vote for either a party based on name recognition or an ideal that no longer exists, instead of looking at the actual platform and looking at the voting history and actually choosing policy over rhetoric.
Yeah, I understand that. I actually feel that, and it's one of those things where it's like I'm having to come to grips with the idea that all the changes that I want to see happen socially and politically aren't going to happen in my lifetime. Or most of them are, it's not going to get as far. They're not going to come far enough in my lifetime that I would like to see. And I'm coming to grips with the idea that, yes, keep fighting the fight for the future generation, because there was a generation that came before us that fought for us to be where we are today. So we continue the fight so that generations that come after us are better off than we were. We have a number of different ways set up for you to get in touch with us to provide feedback, ask questions, or just comment in about something we've discussed.
You can hit us up on Twitter or Instagram at untitled_hosts, or shoot an email over to untitled.hosts@gmail.com.
Or get in touch directly with Jesse at jthart.com, or get in touch with me, John, via telepathy.
If you would like to support our work or are interested in listening to our new after show feed, head over to patreon.com/theUntitledPodcast and take a look at the options we have set up.
Thank you for listening.
We hope you've enjoyed the show.
And we hope to connect with more of you as we continue this journey.
That's a wrap. Pause, because we can certainly use that as a cut point, but I immediately want to say that it sounds great until you take into account that the generation that came before us is suddenly fighting against forward movement instead of continuing the trends that they set.
Well, we can end on a low point.
But I don't necessarily want to. It's one of those things where how much of it is me being pessimistic? Because think about it. You go out, you don't pay attention to the news. You just go out and watch personal interactions. And the world is a lot friendlier than the news would have you believe.
Definitely.
So how much of me being pessimistic about previous generations is truly, representative of their behaviors and not a very specific subset of what I have observed from personal interaction? So it's one of those things where I'd rather give the benefit of the doubt. I would rather assume positive intent.
Yeah. I think it's a better way to live sometimes. As long as, I had a lead genius in New York who said, always assume positive intent to their face. But I want you to assume negative intent in your head all the time, John. All the time. And it wasn't wrong. Because if you approach the situation assuming positive intent externally, but expect negative intent internally, that prevents. One, you probably live a happier life because pretty soon people will disappoint you time and time again. And two, you don't get had if you are looking for the chance that you're trying to be had. So it's a balance.
I may include the last snippet as well as like a bonus at the end, because I have fun with those. Let the credits play and then have the little bonus snippet.
Yeah, that would be really cool. I had kind of I don't know if I put just a few minutes ago put an after show topic. I don't have a lot. I just wanted to share a few thoughts because I thought it was worth it.
Bel Air?
Yeah. Do you know about this?
Well, I know the Fresh Prince of Bel Air.
Yeah. So the Fresh Prince of Bel Air was a sitcom in the 90s, 90 to 96, 6 seasons. And last year, 2022, they rebooted it, and it's just called Bel Air.
I thought I heard something about that.
Yeah.
So do you remember Night Court?
Yeah, they're rebooting that.
I didn't even know about that until I saw a mutual acquaintance post about it on social media.
And tomorrow, actually, on the 19th, Netflix is dropping that 90s show. It's a sequel to that 70s show. So far,
I did hear about that one coming, at least.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know how I feel about that one, but
I watched the trailer. I don't have high expectations for it.
See, the problem is I don't have high expectations for any of these.
So I don't have high expectations for that 90s show after watching the trailer. I think that maybe Night Court might be as good as it was as the original, especially if you never saw the original that much or weren't too, I don't know. I'm not sure what to think. They rebooted Saved by the Bell.
It seems like I remember hearing that, but I didn't follow Saved by the Bell that close. That was actually the transitionary period post me paying attention to a lot of after-school media. Like, I still watched it. I'm familiar with it, but I didn't follow it like a lot of people.
I was huge into Saved by the Bell. The reboot is the worst reboot I've ever seen. Like, I'm not even being hyperbolic. It's bad. Like, I couldn't watch it. There's just nothing interesting about it at all. I don't like. I watched the reboot of Full House. It's at least sometimes funny.
Yeah, I never watched the reboot of Full House. I just didn't want to.
Did you watch Full House as a kid?
I didn't want to taint that memory at all.
So the life lessons in Full House are garbage. Like, they're truly awful.
Well, sure. That's not why I watched it in the first place.
Neither did I. It was I don't know, it was a fun show to watch. But I'll say this. If you have the time to watch the very first episode of the reboot of Full House, it's worth it for the shade the writers, the producers, the cast throw at the Olsen twins, who were not at all involved in it.
Yeah, I might watch it for that, just to see.
They throw some shade. You know what? You don't even have to watch it for that. I will find the clip for you. That's all you need. You don't even need to watch the episode. It's probably, if you're uninterested in it, it's a waste of your time. I'll find that clip. It stands alone. You don't need any context for it. But like I said, the Saved by the Bell was truly awful. I couldn't watch it. I'm a completist, and I stopped after one episode. No, 2 episodes. It was just it's not good. I don't have high hopes for. I love that 70s shows. I don't have high hopes for that 90s show. Basically, Kurtwood Smith and Deborah Jo Rupp, the actors that play Red and Kitty Foreman, have their granddaughter and their friends over, and they're just repeating that 70s show with the kids in the 90s. So I will watch it just to see the 90s references and so forth, but I don't have high hopes for it at all. And Night Court, I didn't watch a lot of. I watched some, but I was young, and it was in syndication at the time. I remember it being kind of funny, but I don't have a strong attachment to it. So I might check out the reboot of that as well, just to see what it's about, an episode or 2.
Yeah, at some point I'll probably at least check out the reboot of Night Court. The original, over time, I know I watched every episode available. Now, it was obviously in syndication at the time, so I claim I have at least seen every episode, but it's only because I never saw an episode at a certain point that I hadn't seen previously. So they may very well have just not re-aired a specific episode. I wouldn't know the difference.
See, that was me with MASH until I started buying the DVDs, and then I was like, oh, that's a scene they cut out from this episode in syndication, and oh, here's an episode that they never showed. But I pretty much saw probably like 90% of the MASH episodes until I saw all of them.
And the whole point of my mention there is just that there's probably something from the original Night Court I haven't seen. But overall, I at least know the show pretty well. And I loved it. I thought it was just highly entertaining. I never tried to think of it as anything other than entertainment. So it actually would be an interesting experiment for me to go back and watch it now and see what I think.
So the one I really wanted to talk about was Bel Air. I watched the trailer and I was like, oh, this has potential. And since I'm traveling this week, I downloaded this one season, 10 episodes, downloaded all of them, and was watching them on the plane. And I didn't really know what to expect. I didn't know, I knew it wasn't going to be a sitcom. It's definitely a drama. And I have, if I believed in guilty pleasures, evening time soap operas or dramas or whatever you want to call them, they would be my guilty pleasure. But I own them. I will tell you, I was a big fan of The OC. I was a big fan of Felicity. I got into Beverly Hills 90210. I will watch those kind of shows. I'd never watched daytime soap operas. I drew a line there because I couldn't do it. But
the acting to me was just so much worse in the daytime.
Yeah. At least the acting and the writing in the evening time ones are pretty good, and some better than others, but pretty good. I didn't watch Party of Five or I hated Seventh Heaven. I think Seventh Heaven. Hated
Seventh
that
Heaven.
Show. Hated it. But Jessica
Did you
Biel.
watch Dawson's Creek?
Who cares? I watched the last 6 episodes of Dawson's Creek as they were released, and I was like, oh, it's a show I would have watched, but I haven't gone back to watch it.
That one, I did not watch it at the time that it was live, but I have gone back and watched some of it to kind of
context
understand it. I wouldn't say I've seen them all for sure, but overall I enjoyed it. It was one of those things where it was entertaining and it was an escape, and I didn't have to think too hard.
I watched the last 6 episodes because I saw that No Doubt was on the 6th to last episode, and I was really into No Doubt at the time, so I watched it for that, and then I got hooked and watched the remaining 5 episodes. I don't even remember how it ends though.
I don't either. But this brings up an interesting point. That was during an era of television where you would have guest appearances by a band or an artist at some point, and there would be a musical number for the show. New York Undercover did it. Dawson's Creek did it. Pick a show.
Season 2 of the OC did it almost every episode.
Yeah, Conviction did it. I mean, and Conviction was a show that only ran 1 season before it was canceled. It was a very much a trademark of that era of television, and that was what I loved.
Yeah, late 90s, early 2000s.
Yes.
We're going to have a band.
And I loved it. I loved being exposed to music that I would not typically be exposed to. I can't tell you how many albums I bought later as a result of that.
The majority of the music that I associate with the 2000s came from watching the OC, because they had really good music on that show. So
how's the music in Bel Air?
Okay, it is exposing me to a lot of rap and R&B that I otherwise wouldn't have given the time of day to, that I was like, this sounds good. The music is really good. They actually did have one musical guest on there, but I am so not into that genre that I didn't, I was like, I bet he's famous. I just don't know him. I know 3, if it was, let's see. If it was Kanye, which I don't think they would have put on the show, if it was Kanye or do I know any other rappers by name?
Well, this might be an interesting time if I know more than you.
You probably do.
I mean, Dr. Dre, Eminem,
Yeah.
50 Cent.
Yeah, those are all 2000s ones. They are not, well, I mean, I don't know that they are, I mean, they made their start in the 2000s, so I think this person...
Yeah, my exposure and foray into that genre was strictly in the 2000 era.
Right, me too. Like, you say, all those names that you mentioned, like, oh yeah, I know them from the 2000s. Well, I guess Dr. Dre was like, you know, he was an NWA
in the 90s with Dre.
I was gonna say he was an NWA in the 80s, and then had solo stuff in the 90s. Oh, you forgot Snoop Dogg.
Oh, I didn't forget him. I just never listened to him.
See, I kind of like Snoop Dogg. Yeah, I don't know. I don't even remember who it was, but I assume that it would be somebody that people who listen to rap and hip hop would know. We could ask my friend Ellery, because that's a lot of what he listens to. So anyway, like I said, the trailer looked promising, and the episodes that I've watched did not disappoint. It was really good.
And that was on Netflix, you said?
It's on Peacock. It is really good. It is, let's see, I was very skeptical of the actor playing Will Smith, because Will Smith played Will Smith in Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And the kid that they got to play Will Smith is younger than Will Smith, because Will Smith was he was well into his 20s playing a high school kid. And it's pretty clear because he has a pretty strong mustache, even in the first episode. But they got a kid who's actually pretty young, I guess, like age appropriate, playing the role. And I was really skeptical of him. But by the end of the first episode, I was like, okay, they cast this guy well. And it was like he wasn't copying the mannerisms of the actor Will Smith, but he was not paying homage, but he had the essence of the mannerisms of the character Will Smith in the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And so that's like, I looked at that as like a really fine line to walk, and he did it. I think he does it well. The show plays an appropriate amount of homage to the sitcom. In here and there in the first several episodes, there's like, oh, I remember that from the sitcom. Oh, I remember that from the sitcom, and it was done for the genre that the show is. Like, I'm trying to think of how to describe it, but you probably remember from the sitcom where Will wears his uniform jacket inside out because it had a cool pattern and he wanted to differentiate himself from all the other students at the academy. In the reboot, Will doesn't do it for that reason. There's a scene where somebody bumps him, and he spills mustard on his jacket. So he wipes it off, or he tries to wipe it off and makes it worse. And so he just takes the jacket off and turns it inside out and puts it on. And he's like, oh, I really like, it was kind of like he didn't do it to differentiate himself. He just did it to hide a stain. And then it like turns out, oh, I really like it. And it sets me apart from people. So it like harnessed the spirit of what they were doing in the sitcom, but applied it appropriately for the genre of the show. And they've done that with so many aspects of the show, to the extent that, like, as I'm watching the reboot, it feels like the original sitcom is how you would tell the story to your kids to soften up what actually happened. The whole he got in trouble for messing with some guys on the basketball court in the first episode of the show. Like, that's kind of the very beginning of the first episode. he's playing basketball with these guys, and it takes a turn for the worse. And he pulls out a gun and fires it into the air to stop a fight. And then the police come and arrest him and the other guys that were fighting. And he gets, strings are pulled. He gets out of jail and gets sent straight to Bel Air because his mom is afraid that the other guy is going to kill him. Like the whole point, it doesn't hide, like in the 90s sitcom. Sure, like gang violence is, we know it's gang violence. It's totally sugar coated. In the reboot, they show it, they dramatize it. It's a real thing, and the whole show is kind of like feels like, oh, this is how it actually would have happened. And the sitcom is like, here's how I would tell the story to kids under 10 years old.
Yeah, I'll have to add it to the list to take a look at.
It's very interesting to watch, been a casual fan of Fresh Prince. It was like one of those shows that, like, when it would come on, I would watch it, but I definitely haven't seen all the episodes.
Yeah, I would put myself in that same category.
Yeah. And then it's just like, the people that the casting was well done. I was really impressed with the direction they took with it and how they executed it, and I hope that it does really well because the creators did a really good job with it.
Well, it certainly makes me at least more inclined to watch it. I mean, I knew that they were doing it, and I hadn't heard anything else. And to me, that's always until I hear something else, I have no reason to go look for it. And so you provide the something else.